coin is metal costs. So about 85%, about 85 cents, and about 50 cents for manufacturing, and then distribution on top of that. So in order to get the $2 to $3, which percentages or which amounts go up in your study?
More costs allocated. The fixed costs are allocated, so it's not necessarily the material costs that go up. It is those other fixed costs that we allocated. What we did was we took the transfer from the Ministry of Finance, the amount of money that they transfer based on the annual report to the Mint, and we take that amount and we allocate part of that to the penny. Well, how do you allocate the fixed cost to the penny? This became the debate, and the method we used was we said, well, the penny represents X percentage of total production. And so, since the penny represents the lion's share of production, we are going to give it that percentage of the allocation of these overhead costs, and which is how we came up with our number.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hallberg. Senator Dixon from Halifax, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for the well-prepared presentations and your thought on this process. But I guess there are a couple of questions that arise from questions that other senators have asked. And from my particular point of view, I take the consumer's perspective. And when it comes to rounding, I don't know what classification the bank industry are they rounding, or how are they operating? The retailers say they're rounding, but the cost of the bank, the cost savings to the banks, the financial institutions of Canada, as a result of there no longer being a penny. What's the savings to the banks, to the financial institutions? Noting from your report here, it's what, 20 million, or probably in excess of 20 million.
Yeah, there will be a saving of at least 20 million, and you hope that in their fee they will drop their fees in consequence.
Well, that's where I was going. Well, the second question goes to Mr. Dupuis. Are you going to drop your fees, or are you not going to drop your fees?
Well, si les coûts sont moins élevés, en théorie, tous les institutions.
If the costs are reduced, all institutions will reduce their rates because there's competition. It's the same play of competition. Same thing as for rounding. If retailers could all round up, they would all do, but they cannot because there is competition. And so the banking sector is very competitive, and probably the prices of the banks would be lowered. But $20 million is a rather small amount for all the banks taken together.
It's a small amount from a bank's perspective, but when I look at the costs as well to the retailers, there's some of the costs there that probably accounting, for example, there'd be a saving there, probably other costs as far as the financial institutions are concerned. And Desjardins is a leader in the financial industry, so I'm wondering, are you going to be a leader and reduce the fees, or are you going to be a follower? If the rest go up or stay the same, you're going to do the same. What's your position? Leader or follower?
Well, I guess going to be leaders, yes.
Leader, yeah. And coming down.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's very interesting.
À la marge, on va être...
Marginally. There will be a marginal decrease.
We will order less coin because the penny won't be there. The cost of a roll of a 50-cent roll of 50 piece is sometimes like 15 cents, 30%. So their order of coins will come down, and there will be automatic saving for the retailer.
I appreciate that, and probably, you know, I could follow up with another question, but I shan't, as to whether or not we should be moving more, instead of to a non-cashless, moving more to a cashless society, but I won't go down that road. But recently, over the weekend, I happened to read in one of the newspapers that there was a public opinion survey, and it's about an even split, 50% or around a little less than 50% to no longer have the penny. 38% still want the penny, and 20% are kind of undecided. Do you have any comment on that?
Lorsqu'on a commencé, nous...
No, when we started our study in 2005-2006, we referred to the benefits of getting rid of the penny, and the results in public opinion polls increased, and at one time 80% of the Quebec people were in favor of that. So the more we'll talk about it, the more we'll explain to people what the consequences are, the more we'll explain the benefits for consumers, the more people will agree with that. As Jean-Pierre mentioned, there's lots of mistakes, erroneous ideas in people's minds about that. They misunderstand the consequences of eliminating the penny. Especially they believe that it could lead to inflation and it could be to their disadvantage. So once that has been clarified, once we explain to people that there won't be increased inflation, I think there'll be lower fear, less fear in the population, and then more and more people really accept the idea, I believe.
Just one more question, if I may. Considering public opinion of politicians today and the banking industry as well, who do you think should be leading the charge of addressing public opinion, assuming the government makes a recommendation to no longer have the penny? In other words, which institution? Surely, do you think the financial industry has a role here, or is it the Consumers Association of Canada, for example? What's the strategy? What would you suggest the strategy be?
In New Zealand, there was the government, basically the central bank and finance and so on, took the lead, but they got heavy support from the financial institution and from the retailing enterprise. The government knows the number and so on, so it's the government to say what are the true costs and so on, what are the true business case. The Bank of Canada has a fair lot of credibility in talking about inflation effects and so on. So the government should have a plan of communication, and I'm sure the others will follow.
If I could, just one more. In 2000, my recollection from previous witnesses, in 2005, there was an internal study by, I think, the Bank of Canada with regard to there no longer being a penny. And then there was, the study was not made public. And then there was an application under the Freedom of Information Act, and in 2007 that study was made public. Have any of you gentlemen have access, have you read that study, and would you like to comment on that study?
On a reçu plusieurs études par la loi de l'accès à l'information, mais je ne sais pas quelle étude exactement que vous parlez. Je ne me souviens pas de mémoire d'avoir eu une étude de la Banque du Canada sur ce dossier. On a eu des études du ministère des Finances, de la monnaie royale peut-être, mais pas la Banque du Canada.
We did not get a study from the Bank of Canada. The Bank of Canada had internal memos on the effect on inflation and so forth. Last fall, there was an access to information request from journalists concerning the cost of a 1-cent piece, because the government were saying it cost less than a penny, and all of a sudden the figure of 1.2 cents appeared, and I've also heard 1.5 in one of these sessions. I think that the Bank of Canada's contribution is to talk about inflation, cost increases, and I think it would be worthwhile if either some level of government would look at other countries, and there are contacts with other departments of finance, other mints and central banks, and they can carry out conversations with them. I thought that the New Zealand Central Bank was very open and very willing to discuss their experience. And I think it's the government, really, which has the official figures, and it's the government which makes the final decision and must assume leadership. I would also add, when we stop producing the penny, This will provide a lot of capacity for production for the mint to produce coins for other countries, because that would contribute to their income. In fact, I don't think there will be a loss of employment. I think that the mint will be able to explore other avenues of production, because we can largely compensate for the stopping of minting the penny. In fact, the mint produces coins for New Zealand.
Thank you. Like Senator Dixon, I think that I'm probably more of a representative of the consumer interest here, and that's the reason that my calculations were based on costs to consumers rather than all of the other costs that get piled on top of those. But I don't know